Living as an undocumented immigrant in the United States is a stressful experience. I know, I get it. I mean, you got to worry about not breaking any laws. I mean, everybody has that concern. However, the consequences for an immigrant are so much worse because you might find yourself in removal proceeding or deportation proceedings, not just a criminal issue. And one of the most stressful parts of this entire experience is if and when you ever come face to face with a police officer. Now, there's naturally a lot of fear and anxiety surrounding meetings with the police. In fact, most immigrants, documented or undocumented, and even some US citizens, have this fear. So you're not alone in this. But what's interesting here is that most of this anxiety comes from not knowing how you should be interacting with the police in the first place. There's a fear of the unknown because we don't know how an encounter with the police or ICE will play out. We don't know if it'll end badly, so we end up assuming the worst. Immigrants, especially people who aren't familiar with US laws and policy, don't know what they should or shouldn't say and when they should and shouldn't go to a meeting with a police officer or an immigration officer. In turn, this makes it more likely they'll end up making a mistake that could cost them. Well, in this video, we're going to tell you what these mistakes are and how to avoid them. I'm Mejer, and I'm an immigration attorney as well as an immigrant myself. My family and I actually immigrated from Chile to the US back in the 80s, and it took us quite a bit of time to get our papers. In fact, I lived twice in Chile, twice in the US, and twice in the US in Israel. I came to the US in the 80s as a child, not speaking English. I moved to Israel as an adult, not speaking Hebrew, and then I left my family in Israel and came back to the US alone. So believe me when I tell you, there isn't much in the immigration experience that I haven't personally encountered. In 1999, I became a US citizen. It took a really long time to get there. And one of the things that we were really worried about was making a wrong move with law enforcement agency that would affect their immigration process. Unfortunately, we didn't have access to resources like this back then, so we had to figure out everything on our own. That doesn't have to be the case for you. If you are an undocumented immigrant here in the US or someone on their immigration journey, keep watching the video till the end to find out what your rights are as a non-citizen in this country, what you should do if you meet a police officer or an immigration official, and what not to say to them. And if you find the video helpful, please consider subscribing to the channel and checking out our other videos. And share this with others who you think need the information. Now let's get into it. First things first, know your rights. So many immigrants I talk to tell me how unsafe they feel because they don't think they have any rights as a non-citizen living in the US. This is one of the most harmful misconceptions out there. Non-citizens, just like US citizens, have certain rights that are protected by the US Constitution. I'll go over two basic ones that you should be aware of as an undocumented immigrant. First up, we have the Fifth Amendment, which gives you the right to remain silent. This was very important because it means you have the right to not answer questions that incriminate you. What are the questions and who asks them? Well, any police officer or government official, including an immigration official, can ask you questions like, what is your immigration status? Or when or how you entered the country. Now, if you're an undocumented immigrant, answering these questions truthfully can land you in trouble, maybe even lead to deportation. On the other hand, lying is an even worse option. So what do you say if ICE or the police ask you this question? Well, nothing. You have the right to remain silent, and you should use it, especially if you don't have a lawyer with you. If you do end up exercising this right, say it out loud to the officer. You aren't legally obligated to answer the question. Next up, we have the Fourth Amendment, which protects your right to not be searched or seized. Basically, the amendment makes sure that police or government officials, such as ICE agents, cannot enter your home, workplace, or car, especially without a warrant, unless they meet certain specific circumstances. Similarly, You also do not have to consent to let a police officer search your car, yourself, or your belongings. If they ask you to do so, you can and you should say no. Please remember, though, that if an officer suspects you have a weapon, they can pat you down. This is because of probable cause. Probable cause is when a police officer knows or believes a fact about you that leads them to believe that you may have committed or are committing a crime. This crime may be either a federal crime or an immigration violation if we're talking about immigration authorities here. So in this situation, if a police officer sees an outline of what looks like a weapon on your clothes, that gives them probable cause to search you, and if they find the weapon, to arrest you. In this situation, you should be patient and comply as much as possible. However, you have the right to ask the officer on what basis they're stopping you. What is their probable cause? Now that we've got that covered, let's talk about a few things you should generally keep in mind when you're interacting with a police officer. The first is prioritizing your safety. We've seen encounters with the police can be very sensitive. Everybody has seen cases in the news where people have been killed while in police custody. So it's human nature to be afraid. This fear can cause you to be distrustful or hesitate or get defensive, but showing this can make a police officer encounter more stressful for everyone involved. So, first rule of thumb is to remain calm. You're probably thinking, well, it's easy for you to say, Andres. You try meeting with a police officer and acting like everything is okay. Well, I don't share this very often, but when I was younger, police showed up at my house looking for my father, and I had to lie. I told the officer that my father wasn't there when I knew he was there. I'm not proud of it, and I was a kid and I was young then. It's not something I recommend that you do, but the point is I've been there. So trust me when I say that staying calm, no matter what the situation is the best course of action. It doesn't mean it's easy. Panicking will just make things worse. So try to keep a clear head and deal with the situation. This, of course, includes not running away. If you see a police officer coming towards you or stopping you, do not under any circumstances flee or run away. This will end up making you look guilty and give the officers probable cause to search or detain you, which is the opposite of what you wanted. And I know that being stopped by police or ICE will ring a lot of alarm bells in your head, but you must be confident in your rights and believe that you'll be able to handle the situation. Just remember that when you come face to face with police or immigration officer, compliance is important. However, you don't have to agree to everything they ask you to. For example, if police or immigration officer asks you to sign documents or sign your rights, say no. Better yet, don't sign any document unless a lawyer is present and has reviewed it with you. Also, going back to your rights, you don't have to answer every question that they ask you. It doesn't matter if you take some time to answer or choose not to answer. Make sure you say exactly what you mean and are truthful. This is because anything you say to an officer can be used against you in a court of law. So be careful that you don't end up saying something that can be twisted or used against you. Honesty is super important here as well, because the consequences of being found to have lied to an officer can be serious. This goes for lying, claiming, for example, claiming you're a US citizen when you're not, carrying as well as showing fake documents to law enforcement or to ICE. If you're found out, which you could be, you're gonna have to deal with criminal charges in addition to whatever they stopped you, or a potential lifetime ban on coming to the United States for a false claim to US citizenship. Two other important things to avoid are resistance and obstruction, because those can be reasons for immediate arrest. What I mean here is that you shouldn't argue with the officer, touch them in any way, or even be slightly hostile. If you're a family member arrested, don't try to stop the police from making the arrest. That could be a crime, and it could only worsen your situation. Even if you feel your rights were violated or that the officer was treating you unfairly, make sure you remain patient and approach the situation calmly. Don't try to argue or resist by touching the officer or running away, because this is just going to complicate things even more for you. Instead, in cases where you feel you were treated wrongly, try to gain as much information about the officer as you can. This includes things like the officer's name, badge number, patrol car numbers, what agency they're from, and so on. Maintain a detailed account of what exactly happened, talk to a lawyer, and make a report afterwards. If you are physically injured, seek medical attention, and take pictures of your injuries. If you or another witness has a video of the encounter, that's even better. You can later submit a complaint to the agency the officer belongs to, and they will follow up on it. If you want to remain anonymous for your safety, most agencies allow you to make an anonymous report. Finally, if you are stopped by the police or ICE, or the officer makes an arrest, the first thing you should do is ask for a lawyer. Let's face it, if you're facing an officer or possible criminal charges, you're going to be confused or scared. In the heat of the moment, there could be miscommunication or hasty decisions, which might end up hurting your case. It is exactly in those moments that a lawyer can help protect you. Your right to remain silent should stay in place when you are asked any questions you don't want to answer. Ideally, you should speak to the police or ICE only after consulting your attorney. One thing you should consider in the case of an arrest is who's arresting you. If a police officer is arresting you, you should be aware you can request a government-appointed attorney if you don't have one. This means government will pay for your representation. I have met some good public defenders, but almost none will speak your native language unless it's English. The problem is less about their ability than the time they can give to your particular case. You don't get the same level of attention as with a private attorney. Because of their caseload, public defenders generally resist going to trial and will try to convince you to accept a plea agreement. Unfortunately, that is true for most private attorneys as well. Just remember, the decision is yours to make it, so choose wisely. If an ICE agent or officer detains you, however, you will need an immigration lawyer, but the government won't pay for it. There is no option for a public defender in an immigration context. If you don't hire an immigration attorney, you won't get one, with a few exceptions. Now, this is all general stuff so far, so we've been talking about interacting with people. It can be different depending on the situation. So let's talk about one of the most common situations in which you come face to face with a police officer when you are pulled over. This may be when you're driving and breaking traffic laws, or if the officer has probable cause to stop and search you. Sometimes you may not be a driver at all and just happen to be a passenger at the wrong place at the wrong time. In this situation, remember the golden rule: remain calm and comply as much as you reasonably can. Pull over safely, turn off the engine, open the windows part way, and always keep your hands on the wheel. In certain states, you'll have to tell officers your name if they ask you to identify yourself. In others, you don't even have to do that. Don't answer any questions that you don't want to. If they ask you for documents like your insurance, car registration, or driver's license, you must present them. But again, you don't have to answer questions about your immigration status. If the officer tells you to step out of the car, calmly exit the vehicle, not the video. If the officer then tries to search you, your belongings, or your car, you can tell them, and you should in a loud voice, "I do not consent to the search." Technically, police cannot arrest you for saying no to a search. However, if the officer has probable cause that you're armed, they can conduct a limited search of your body for safety reasons. It's important that you do not resist if they do so. If you're not carrying a weapon, which you shouldn't be as an undocumented immigrant, you should be okay, unless you have an order of arrest. Then you got a different problem. If the officer tells you to take a blood, urine, or breath test because they think you may be driving under the influence or drunk driving, most states have what's called implied consent. Implied consent means that by driving on the road, you are agreeing to take a chemical test to assess the level of alcohol in your body. Implied consent laws vary by state, but most states have them. But that doesn't mean a police officer could just walk up to you and demand, "Hey, I want to take your blood, urine, or breath test." They have to at least have probable cause. If you refuse to give the test, depending on the state, you could be charged with refusal to give the test, which could result in driver's license suspension and possibly more, even jail time, depending on the case. If you're not sure what to do, don't refuse anything without first consulting an attorney. Remember, you have the Fifth Amendment right to not incriminate yourself. So, "I'm sorry, I won't answer any questions without talking to an attorney. I'm sorry, I won't take any tasks without first speaking to an attorney," is appropriate. Apart from stops by police officers, Customs and Border Patrol also has the right to conduct roving patrols and may also attempt to pull you over. If a Customs and Border Patrol official has a reasonable suspicion that the driver or passenger in your car committed some immigration violation or a federal crime, they can stop you. You can ask what the probable cause for detaining you was, especially if the stop is for a long time or an arrest is being made and the official should tell you. If they do not, don't argue. Just note down the important information of the officers' names, badge numbers, in case your rights are violated. In any case, your right to remain silent still stands. Even if the official asks, you do not have to tell them your immigration status. Remember, you have a right. Now let's look at another situation where knowing your rights and a general guideline on what to do will help you when the police show up at your home. Again, this sort of situation would cause a great deal of fear and distress in anyone, but keeping calm should always be a priority. An emotional response or decision is usually regretted once the emotion passes, so you should focus on knowing what you want to do in such a scenario. Let's play this one out together so you know what sort of interaction should be expected. If the police show up on your door, the first thing is to find out the purpose of the visit. Ask the officers if they are immigration agents, what their departments are, their badge number, and any ID through a peephole or a window. Next, remember you're not obligated to allow them to enter your house. If they only want to talk, it's probably best to speak to them through a window instead of letting them into the house. Even if you open a door, that doesn't give them permission to come inside, but just to be safe, talk through the door. The other case where the officers have not arrived to talk would be where they have a warrant signed by a judge, not an immigration officer. It has to be by a judge. Now, if you are shown a warrant, which is a legal document, you might consider yourself helpless. You're not though, because a warrant issued for a specific person's arrest can only allow officers to enter the home without consent if they believe the person is inside. In other words, in other warrants that are issued, particularly in immigration cases like Form I-205, it's a warrant of removal. Officers can't enter your home if you don't let them. So if officers bring up a warrant, you should ask them to hold it in clear sight from a window or slide it under the door for examination, because you have the right to see it. And guess what? It may not be a warrant signed by a judge. In the unfortunate situation, the law enforcement forces their way into your home, remember to say out loud that you do not consent to their entry. Don't try to handle the situation yourself and become hostile with officers, because they'll lead you in the opposite direction you're aiming for. Instead, firmly say you do not allow them to step into the house, and you can file a complaint with authorities later. In case of an arrest warrant for you or anyone in your home, again, it's important to stay composed. Don't try to flee or lie in the situation. Instead, remember, you have the right to remain silent and get in contact with your lawyer right away. Make sure the warrant is signed by a judge. Make sure it has your name on it and your address. Because if it doesn't have the right address, and if they're not looking for you, doesn't have your name on it, well, then they can't use it as a basis to enter your house. Now, there is a situation where an officer may enter your home without a warrant, which I'll explain to you so you know how to proceed. If the officer sees any evidence of a crime in plain view within your home, they can enter without your consent. Now, what would a crime in plain view be? A few examples would be officer suspects that a criminal has fled to your house, or they believe someone in your house needs urgent aid or assistance. Now, how the officer would be able to observe the crime in plain view can help you avoid such a situation. For example, if the officer claims that they've seen a person of interest run into your home, you can reiterate that there are no open doors or windows. If you don't let them into the house, they're not going to see the drugs on the table, assuming that there are drugs on the table. My advice in such conditions would be to remain vigilant and look out for cues by the police officer, so you can politely yet firmly communicate that you do not, I repeat, do not consent to the search. That wraps up our video for today. If this video was of value to you, please consider liking and sharing it with people who may find it helpful. Also, drop any immigration-related questions you have in the comments below, and we'll try our best to provide an answer to you. You can call us today if you want to discuss your case or need help on your green card or immigration journey. We will let you know if and how we can help. Thanks for watching. Until next time, stay healthy and be safe.